what do you bring to the table to help make the Board of Selectmen better?
Well, I'd need about 20 minutes, but no, I'm kidding. So what do I bring to the table? So a little bit about my background. So I'm a CPA, certified public accountant. It's what I've done since I graduated college. So I kind of stopped at 25 years and said over 25 years. So I've been doing it for 25 years, and I'm in public practice. So I'm a partner in a CPA firm. So I deal with clients and issues such as the some of those that you mentioned that the town is currently dealing with in terms of finance and CFO and all those different things on a daily basis. So I bring the background and knowledge of having worked with situations similar to what Wilton's going through in some aspects, at least in the financial related aspects for the past 25 years.
Great that you start off with that. So let's move right to those finance questions.
Sure.
What do you think about all the finance related issues this past year in town hall? I mean, what do you think about it, and what would you do to make it better?
As I followed these issues closer and closer, and read, I'll say some of the reporting. Good Morning Wilton's a great resources for the town to read what's happened if someone's not going to sit through the meetings and things like that. So, some of the things that are reported are can be viewed as somewhat alarming, and they are. But they're also somewhat common issues, unfortunately, that are seen often. There are ways to address. There can be very straightforward. I think the importance is recognizing the issue, addressing the issue, and resolving it. But I feel like what's happened uh, in human nature to some degree is a lot of finger pointing and trying to sugarcoat it and say, well, it's not really like that. Well, everybody's overworked, and all those things are great. But the simple fact is, these changes need to be made. The changes can be fairly straightforward. They're not uncommon issues in terms of CFOs reviewing things. The tax assessor and all these different things are not uncommon issues for towns or other businesses. They just simply need to be addressed, and we need to stop kind of the pointing fingers and placing blame. Just address the issues. It doesn't matter who caused the issues, why we have the issues. We have the issues. We need to address them, and we need to resolve them. We have a lot of smart people in town. There's a lot of smart people on the various boards that can address these issues. And I think if we just focus on addressing the issue, we're going to be better off, because the reality of it is the majority of people that I talk to, and I think the more majority of residents, that's not what they want to see with the town. If you look at what people love about Wilton, what they enjoy about Wilton, it's education, it's all these things. It's not purchase order wasn't properly approved or something wasn't properly done. Those things are very, very important, but we elect people, we hire people to address those issues. I don't think we should have, Board of Selectmen meetings where we're debating a review and approval. They're very necessary. They need to be addressed. Don't get me wrong, but we need to move on to the bigger issues. We need to address those issues and move on.
I'm thinking back. One of the sort of big pivotal moments this year was you have an elected town leader who's also receiving a big salary in town,
Mm-hmm.
Tony Boucher. She comes to the Board of Selectmen with a budget that's, I think at the time it was something like 12%, 11.5%
Right.
increase. And in essence, dumps it on the Board of Selectmen and says, here, I don't know what else to do. You fix this because I
Yeah.
can't meet the budget guidance. How do you respond to that? Without, I understand this idea about not wanting to point fingers, but how would you have responded to that?
It's sort of a theoretical question in terms of how you develop a budget in a lot of ways. I've heard Tony talking, I've heard Matt Raimondi talking, and there's multiple ways to develop a budget, right? You can go top down or you can go bottom up. I feel like what Tony is doing is going bottom up and kind of going back and saying, well, this is what I came. Matt's looking at it top down. Here's what we have. Here's how we can allocate it. Let's push it down. And so that's where we seem to have this disconnect. So I think we need to have some sort of discussion and resolution to what the budget is, the purpose of the budget, and how we go about agreeing on those numbers. Because there may be things, Tony talks about the payroll and different costs that are just expensive, and we all experiences those, right? We would go to the grocery, we see those. She's not wrong in that. But what we need to do is understand what those are and what that looks like in total. So if Matt says it needs to be 3%, we need to sit down and say, here's why it's 3%, because this is our projected revenue, and here's how it trickles down. When we do our own personal family budgets, right, we don't go, all right, let's figure out everything we want, and then that's our budget. Well, it doesn't work. So you have to somehow be able to agree on what that total number is to be able to allocate it down. So to directly answer your question, Jared, I think we'd have to sit down and try to explain, look, this is a top-down approach. We can't go bottom up. The nice thing about a town is it's fairly easy to predict revenue, right? Because we have a good idea of what our tax base is, and we can project what our revenue is going to look like. So we know that number. So we know the number that we have to come in to balance our budget. We know education, the majority of people in Wilton, education there. I don't know if you saw on Facebook the other day, somebody said, hey, what's the great thing about Wilton? By far and away, education. And it's no secret. It's why I moved here 10 years ago. It's no secret at all. So we know budget for education is what nobody wants to cut it. Nobody wants to. So there are ways to look at it and say, this is what we have to do. And if at the end of the day, that's 5%, then we need to sit down and say, okay, we think it should be 5% residents. Here's what it looks like. Here's how it would affect the mill rate. And here's the things that would be done, whether it's, fixing the town hall or whatever it is. Here's what we think. And that's what we take to the voters. And if they don't agree, then they don't agree. That's not what they want.
I think what Jarrett was getting at was also the roles of the members of the Board of Selectmen and the first selectman. And so management style, it's been a little different from, first selectman to first selectman to first selectman. And in Tony's administration, she has, I think, asked the members of the Board of Selectmen to step up more and take a more active role, where she said, here, we got guidance at, 2 or 3%, but we're giving you an 11% budget to the Board of Selectmen. Help me cut it down. In past administrations, you would have had a first selectman or first select woman who brought that 3% to the Board of Selectmen, already done. What do you think is your role if you're on the Board of Selectmen? Is it to take that active role in helping pare down the budget, in helping solve the financial issues, or figure out what's going on with the CFO and the finance department? Is that your role? Is it, the buck stops here on the first selectman? Whose role is it, and what's your job in all of that?
Yeah, and I think the answer is there's kind of two sides to it. One is who should and kind of who does. So what should we be doing and what are we doing? And I think that, the first way I would answer it is I don't think the Board of Selectmen's role is to be as involved in the finance and their performance and those roles in the finance department. I think that's, the first selectman, first select woman. If it's the budget and budgeting the line items, that's the responsibility of, in this case, Tony and her group. I think the Board of Selectmen's role is to ensure that it's being done properly, that everybody's been taken into account, the numbers work, that it's balanced, and it's something that we're comfortable taking to the voters to vote on.
Well, you're talking about the responsibility, but I'm looking at, we don't have a CFO, we don't have a controller. There's a third position that we're missing. Are you supposed to, as a Board of Selectmen member, just go, oh, well, first selectman will take care of it?
Right. So that's kind of why I was saying should and maybe needs to, or two different things. So I think in this particular case, if we're in a position now, which I think we are, where a CFO is being handled, but maybe the Board of Selectmen needs to get more involved to have more specific of what needs to be done, because we have this process review committee, right? And if you break out the process review committee, and without getting too technical, it doesn't really address the issues that were raised during the audit. There's some performance issues and things like that, but it doesn't really address the crux of the issue without getting too into the sort of the auditing side of it, because it was very specific, right? If you look at the issues that the town has, one of them was accrual type accounting entries, right? Basic accrual entries. That's not a staffing resource, right? That's an error. That's an accounting error. Somebody made an error. Like we do accrual accounting, not cash basis. So if we're not making those journal entries, it's incorrect, and it's not a resource thing. If you give something like I said, I've been an auditor for over 25 years. If someone gives something to us and it's wrong, they did it wrong. It's not, oh, I didn't have time, so here. It's still wrong. Like, take your time, but it's got to be right. And the fact that it's not right is indicative that there were other issues that weren't addressed. Now, those may have been resolved, and I certainly don't know Dawn, and I haven't looked at her performance, so I'm not in any way sort of reflecting on her performance. But you could say there seems to be there's an issue there. There were material weaknesses in the prior year too that were never really addressed. If you look back at the prior audit reports, so I think kind of getting back, the Board of Selectmen needs to have some very specific directives to address those issues. The staffing issues, we need to fill those issues, right? We have, I mean, there are staffing agency. We have one in Wilton that places staffing people. We need to fill those roles. If we focus on it, we can. There's no way it should have been open for 2 years. We can find people.
Talking about staffing, the town right now is also looking for a new town administrator.
Yeah.
And there's this discussion about town administrator coupled with a CFO. So you now have three very, expensive positions: CFO, town administrator, the first selectman. What's your thought on whether or not we really need all three of those positions?
It's a great question. And I think some of it goes into what the town is going to be doing in the next 10 years. I mean, if you look at the recent past, we've been going over these accounting issues, right? The Gilbert, I mean, if you look at the issues, we're getting caught up in some of these things that really aren't beneficial to the town. We need to move past those. So, the question of, is it appropriate to have a town administrator and a CFO? I don't know enough at this point to understand all their roles and responsibilities. I think if you take a step back and put everything into perspective, right? Our town roughly revenue somewhere around 140 million. So we're a $140 million organization. Generally, in a $140 million organization, you don't have three highly paid people running it. You don't need it because it's not of that size. So again, and I know Lynn had hired for specific roles and things. I don't know what those are. I don't know what his role or the new town administrator's role will be. But if it's simply overseeing the finance department, for example, that's the CFO and the Board of Selectmen, and our town is of the size that they can do that. So if there are other roles, other things that the town administrator is going to do, then potentially it makes sense.
Can I ask you, what's your sort of take on the financial state of the town? I'm thinking about, somebody said recently, we were talking to, that they didn't really seem to believe the $150 million needs assessment for town facilities was really accurate. They were kind of like, well, other people are alarmed at the all the different costs and all the different projects and things that we're going to be facing. What's your take on where we're at financially and where we're going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think Wilton's in great shape financially. Certainly we have these, the things that we've talked about, but we can address them. We can overcome them. They're not going to cause significant issues if we address them head on and take care of them. I think financially the town's in good shape. If you look at things like debt per capita, property tax, we get 99.7% of our property taxes are paid. We're a financially healthy town. I think part of it, if depending on an individual's background and what they're dealing, numbers can be you can get sticker shock, right? You can be shocked by these numbers. So you say, 150 million over 10 or 20 years. Okay, we have $72 million of debt right now, something like that, and it's like $4,500 per person. So if each of us wrote a check for $4,500, the town would have no debt at all. That's not, I mean, yes, $4,500 is a lot of money. I understand that. But when you look at, we do live in Wilton, right? Our median income is high. Our median home price is close to $900,000. It's $4,500 in debt. So even if you round up to 5 and say, okay, well, 150, okay, that's another $10,000 per individual over the next 10 years to address all of our town needs. And by the way, it's not just double, because those other that 5,000 that we have now gets paid off. So it's not one-on-one. So these are not issues that are uncommon for a town our size, and they're not terribly big numbers. They may be alarming to somebody who's not dealing with big numbers or seeing big numbers and things like that. But if you told residents, hey, for 150 million, we can fix whatever it is, town hall, Ambler Farm, all these things like everybody wants. It's going to be great. This is what it's going to look like over the next 20 years. People might be happy with it. I don't know. But people don't understand really what it looks like. And I say that on both sides in terms of people that support sort of in these investments and those that are very concerned about the dollars. Certainly they're both very, very important concerns that need to be addressed.
And I know we'll go back to some of those specific things that you mentioned, but I want to ask you, since you're talking about debt and you're talking about what what the town has or what the town may be owed, there's been this conversation about the $2.6 million in unpaid taxes. What do you think about the idea about the tax sale?
It's interesting. I think people should pay their taxes, but I think I listened to the Board of Selectmen meeting, of course, and I heard the concerns about a public shame list and all those things, which I understand. I mean, it's kind of public information. I think I go back to as I understand it, the town just sends out notices, and if someone hasn't paid in years and the town's just sending notices, I mean, other than sort of the ethical, like I owe it, I need to pay it. Like, what's their incentive? They just, I'm just getting another letter. It's been 10 years. I mean, most people will pay, but a lot of, for whatever reason, apparently, we have a lot of people that don't. That 2.6 million is over the 14 years, as I understand it. So, I mean, without doing the math, it might be 100,000 a year, 200, that we're not collecting. So on our revenue of whatever it was last year, 135 million, we didn't collect $200,000. I mean, that's from an accountant standpoint, it's immaterial. If you present the financials, you could round that out. That said, $200,000 would do a lot if it came into the town and we look at some of the things that we need in this budgeting process. It is meaningful. So I think something like that, my approach is it needs to be addressed. I think the town needs to be more proactive than, and as I understand it, just sending out letters, whether it's contacting. I do, to answer your question, then I'll explain a little bit. If it gets to a tax sale, I support it. But I don't think that's going to be very common. I think what should happen is the town should reach out. I think they mentioned a 3-month payment plan. Somebody hasn't paid taxes in 14 years. They probably can't pay it in 3 months. Maybe we have something a year. I don't know, whatever it is. But if somebody's making payments, the town can work with them. And if they don't want to make payments and they don't do anything, then it goes to the tax sale because but it's their choice, really. I think the town can work with someone, but there's no reason why I understand people have, financial issues, they get into pinches, different things like that. But I think it is something that needs to be addressed, and I think it can be addressed without really having to get to tax sales in the majority of cases.
Let's go back. You talked about Gilbert and Bennett. So what do you think that the town should do? Try and preserve it? Sell it? What are your thoughts on that and some of the other historical properties?
Yeah, so I think that touches on a much bigger topic, I'll say. It's interesting because when I talk to people and I look at Facebook, the biggest concerns about Wilton are the bigger issues. Like, what about Merwin Meadows? Why can't I swim? What about Gilbert and Bennett? What about Ambler Farm? It's not this IT $50,000 PO didn't get properly approved. That's not it's and like I said, that's very important. I don't want it, but that's just sort of, it's like a table stake. That should be addressed. That shouldn't be an issue. It's these bigger issues that we need to think about. And it ties in a little bit to Jared's question on the 150 million. It's kind of, what do we want to do? Where are we at with Wilton and where do we see the future? And let's go do it. Housing, one of the questions, I think, Pat, you probably see the patch, one of their questions is, what's the biggest issue facing, our residents? And I thought about that. And it was the other day, it was a beautiful day, gorgeous Connecticut. And I thought the biggest issues facing me have nothing to do with Wilton. Like, I mean, really, what issues do we really have? Sure, we have these things that we'd like to address, but we live in a beautiful town. great state. We have all these things going for us. It's almost like why are we focusing on the negative, right? Let's focus on the positive. But so what I mean by that is housing is probably the number one issue that can and probably will affect Wilton. And the question is, do we take control of it, or does the state? I'm sure you've seen HB 5002 with the housing bill dramatically changes, takes away a lot of the oversight that our local planning and zoning does, forces down, multifamily, different things. So affordable housing is an issue that I think needs to be addressed in the town, because it's going to happen whether we do it or not. And so I think getting in front of it is something we need to do. So Gilbert and Bennett, how it ties in, something like Gilbert and Bennett, the two properties next. I mean, it's a beautiful property. Everyone loves Gilbert and Bennett. People are saying we need to save it. I mean, I think we should think about a plan to use Gilbert and Bennett. I think New Canaan had a similar situation, and it's affordable senior housing, right? They got grants, did a lot of things for affordable. I think it was $4 million to bring Gilbert and Bennett, up to code per se. Again, if we put in our budget and we do the math, they're not huge numbers. It's doable if, as a town, that's what we want to do. When we talk about housing and affordable housing, Ridgefield has a housing authority, New Canaan has a housing authority, Wilton doesn't, right? Developers in Ridgefield are charged fees for the housing authority for their projects. We don't have anything like that, right? Connecticut doesn't allow impact fees. So we have a builder that builds a big facility. We can't charge them fees to upgrade the infrastructure that's caused by their development. A lot of other states you can, but we can't have a housing authority increase our permit fees, charge other fees to allow us to then have funds for affordable housing. So there are a lot of different things that we can do, and I think we need to do that. And Gilbert and Bennett is a perfect example in my mind.
The Board of Selectmen just kind of took a whole issue of affordable housing and put it in the hands of the Capital Planning Committee, and kind of dumped it in their lap. And I don't even know if they're going to be addressing that at all in terms of them seeing that as part of their purview. Curious what you think about how that committee's operating, and what you think about that idea of that.
So it's a newer committee, as you know. There was another housing committee before that. I want to say 2 years ago or 3 years ago that kind of looked at Gilbert and Bennett. There's been a lot of things that have started like that, but not finished. So there was an evaluation of Gilbert and Bennett. There were soil tests done. There were different things. And as someone like me who's trying to learn about things, you read along and then it died, and then it's gone. So now we have another house. So I guess what I'm saying is what I think, and it goes again into, and I'm not by any imagination sort of saying that accounting issues aren't important, and approving change orders and things like that. But when I go to a Board of Selectmen, those are the things that I think we should be discussing. Who's reporting from the housing? What are they doing? What do we want them to do? What do we see? I think there needs to be more specific guidance. There needs to be measurable outcomes, because otherwise it just kind of goes on and eventually dies, which it seems like a lot of committees have done, and that's not unique to Wilton, unfortunately.
So if you are on the Board of Selectmen, is that what can residents or reporters who watch a meeting expect to see you be vocal about that kind of thing? I mean, sometimes, the agenda gets set by the first selectman, and
yes,
Board of Selectmen members ask questions, and then a vote happens. Is that the kind of thing where you're going to say, hey, I really think that this kind of thing needs to be on the agenda next week? We haven't talked about housing in a long time. I think we need to bring that up again. Is that the role you think you'll play?
Yes. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head. The meetings themselves are very structured. So as weird as it might sound, to do something like that, you have to plan for it to be able to do it correctly and effectively. And I think the short answer is yes. The longer answer is something like a selectman's report. Hey, we need to have a plan for this particular issue. I think we need to have agenda item, talk about what our plan is for this, what the deliverables are, the timeline, what we think the outcome is going to be. Those are things that I think need to be added to the agenda. It's not something that can really be, as you said, you can't just in the middle. Oh, I know we're talking about this, but I want to talk about this issue. but it does, and there are ways to get things on the agenda for discussion, and I think that's what we need to do. I think that's what, I'll say the citizens of Wilton those are the issues they want dealt with. Those are what they want to see. That's what we're representative government. They elect us, and we do what they've elected us to do.
And as part of that long-term vision, if I may, and exactly what you're talking about, what about the broad topic of economic development? Everyone talks about economic development, but
Yes. As you probably know, I'm on the Economic Development Commission. So, with my background dealing with businesses and growth and all those different types of things, I thought economic development would be great. I hear all these things about town center. I go down there, the stores aren't there, or they're leaving, or all those different things. So I got involved with the Economic Development Commission. So it's interesting because Wilton's a bedroom community and everybody likes it that way, right? So we did a survey of businesses, and one of the things that came back was kind of what everybody knows: visibility. No one even knows town centers there. It was in the POCD, 2019. I mean, again, it's a great example of another issue that people are aware of, have known of, but just haven't done anything about it. So going back to town center, so I went back and looked, and at one time somebody proposed a Ferris wheel in town center for visibility, which I thought would have been pretty cool. That the flags, I mean, all different kinds of stuff. And so here we do a survey again, and it's the same thing. It's nothing new. So then it was like, well, okay, well, let's address it. Well, we have to put a sign, and that's a state road. Okay, well, let's talk to the state then, right? So it's one of those things where there it's just up to a group of people to set their mind to it, set a goal, and achieve it, because all these things are achievable. They're just not done. So the economic development, town center, we're working to get signs now. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. We're going to present it to the Board of Selectmen, hopefully at the next meeting, and then the state, and go from there. Economic development is sort of a double-edged sword here in Wilton. People are, a lot of people are against growth per se. Some aren't. I think with the new apartment buildings and some of the revenue that's brought in, people are seeing that it actually does help our mill rate. If you look at who the businesses are in Wilton, it's a lot of professional services. There was a large national accounting firm that had their headquarters here several years ago. Private equity, consultants, all those things. We're not going to be a manufacturing town. But there's certainly, a lot of areas for improvement, particularly in town center. Again, it starts by driving traffic, starts by awareness. We have a lot of events in town that draw people in town. The volunteer fair I was just at, all those different things that do really well in town. I don't think we're not going to be Westport. I say that, Jared, because you're in Westport. And it doesn't appear that people want to be, but they want to have local services. They want to have to go, to Danbury. They want to have nice restaurants in town, and we do. I think it's just a matter of improving on what we already have. ASML is without ASML, we'd have a big hole in our fight. And they've been great, right? Ambler Farm, all the things are contributing to the library, the jazz festival next year. I mean, it's great. There's a lot of activity going on. And so I think in terms of economic development, we've done a lot of good things. Wilton's very attractive. I think driving traffic is very important. And, I think it's something that the town should continue to focus on because it is important.
You mentioned Ambler Farm. Let's talk about the Ambler Farm lease. I'm sure you've watched that process. I'm sure you've
Yes.
seen, how it went. How do you view that situation? Any opinions on restoring the yellow house? Any thought on how to make the situation better?
and maybe anything about the handling of the lease too.
Yeah.
That all unfolded.
Yes. I like the last part of your question, how to make it better, Heather. So I'll back up and maybe start from the very beginning. So I believe that the town's obligation, and the lease that the lease agreement should obligate the town for the minimum that the town is obligated for. And I think the reason is as taxpayers, that's what the town should do, obligate us for the minimum that we're required. Then I think we need to look at the farm and what we want to do with the farm. I think if you ask me, I believe that the majority of people in this town support Ambler Farm and would be willing to pay more for Ambler Farm. So I just think that outside of a lease, whether it's providing additional funding to Ambler Farm, there are ways to do it. We can vote on it. I think it should be done. It was interesting. I look back at our last election. If you look at the two items on the ballot that got the most yes votes for and the most against, Ambler Farm and the turf field. So you have people that love sports and the turf field. Oh, let's do the turf field, not Ambler Farm. You have all the people, so that people love both of them, and they're both great. And I just feel like we're kind of getting caught up between what we're required to do and what we want to do. And I think we obligate ourselves for what we're required to do, but then we address what we want to do separately. Does that answer your question a little bit, Heather?
I think so. What does Andy Warren want to do?
With Ambler Farm?
Mhm.
Well, so I'm my kids are older. I would have loved Ambler Farm growing up myself. I had a farm in my backyard, a little square, but I would have loved it. I think it's great. I think it's a great resource for the town. I think it's great for young people to learn farming and all the things that they do. I think we need to support Ambler Farm. I think we should have refurbished the house. I think we should be more involved in the programs that are put on. I think we should utilize it as best we can because it's a great town amenity that people love. And I think again, if you talk to people about what they love about town, that's always one of the things that comes up. And I think it's important to maintain that. And I guess going back to the lease, it's a little bit tough only because I sort of only know what I know, so to speak, because I know there's a lot of talking and things that go on. Um, and so I'll kind of preface it by giving you my understanding of how it happened and then maybe how it should have happened. And my understanding is there were a lot of negotiations for the lease before it was brought to the Board of Selectmen. And then when it was brought to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen had questions, but it was kind of like, well, the Friends of Ambler Farm have been waiting. They thought this was going to be the deal, and now we're holding it up. And so it was a process issue. And I think that's kind of what it came down to. It was brought to the people to approve it sort of after it had been negotiated rather than before. And so when they ask questions, then all of a sudden they're holding it up, so to speak. So I think it should have been a more open process from the very beginning, whether that's, probably not very wouldn't make sense to have the Board of Selectmen all involved necessarily, but a process. We're going to communicate. We're going to have a special meeting. We're going to talk about the negotiations. This is what we're thinking so that you don't get to the end, get it to approve and have a big problem with it. Or just stall the process, take longer.
And you're talking about the responsibilities in the administration versus the Board of Selectmen. Are you aware of there's over $1 million that had been bonded by the town approved for road restoration and is sitting in an account. And then again this year, the DPW went and requested another $700,000 for road improvement, not even aware that they have that money sitting there that hadn't been spent. So, and there's a whole bunch of, again, some financial issues, but a lot of management issues relating to, the police headquarters. There's also some issues related to DPW with Middlebrook. What's your part in trying to, do you just go, well, we have a first selectman, this is their purview technically, but is it?
I think what should happen in situations like that is the Board of Selectmen needs to get involved and address the issue. So whether it's adding agenda item and saying, whether it's, I think the police headquarters is a little bit but if it's the roads, for example, we need to talk about it. Let's go over this. Part of the, I think this goes into a little bit of the issue of trying to get information because, if you look what we've been trying to get, or what it appears the Board of Selectmen is trying to get, even just budget to actuals year to date, where are we at? We can't get that. You heard the report of the interim CFO. I'm still not sure about some of these line items, right? Well, we have to have reliable financial information to be able to make decisions on. Um, and so I think the board, if the Board of Selectmen is not getting the information, then it needs to go to that next level, which is again more concrete. Here's what we need. Here's when we need it, and just move forward in that process. You touched a little bit on like the police. So the one thing I would say quickly on like the police building, regardless of what we do to town hall, is that we're a small town, and I think we need to recognize maybe when we don't have the expertise or the resources. So a project manager probably should have been hired, a third party. My guess is somebody would see that and go, oh, well, it's X dollar too expensive. But when you look at what it really costs us, it's cheaper to have an expert. It's more efficient, more effective. I tell my clients that all the time. But it is. It's so much better to have people that specialize in that. And that's not to say that I think it was Frank that he wasn't qualified, but he has a full-time job. Like he's already, and now and that's a very big project. We don't have many of those projects in town. Again, I don't know Frank's background or whatever, but we can hire a firm that just does project management, and it's their responsibility, and they're going to oversee, and they're going to talk to the subs, and they're going to make sure it's done on time. So I think in situations like that, we need to just recognize we're not a large town. We don't have those resources. We need to pay for them, and we're going to save money and be better off in the end.
I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a different tack, and a little bit of a campaign kind of question. Did Rich Purdy get an unfair advantage by getting appointed to the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, without a doubt. To be frank, and I don't know Rich at all. I mean, I've looked at his background. Seems like a good guy. I saw him at the volunteer fair. So really, what I'm saying is not really personal to him because I don't know him personally. Right. Quite frankly, he's very qualified to serve on the Board of Selectmen. I do think it's an unfair advantage. One, not only it's fine. I mean, I can sit through the meetings too, and I do. He's privy to the executive sessions. He also has his name out there. One of my other questions is he the only one that was willing to do it? Because there are two people running, but only one of them apparently was willing to serve for 2 months. But to me, the bigger question, quite frankly, who told him that he needed to be a Democrat between 1:30 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. that he went and registered? Like, that's not what we want in transparency, is it? Like, I don't see that. To me, that's not a check mark, and we're doing great things in Wilton. That's more of the same.
You talk about transparency. Where's the problem if there's a problem with transparency in town hall?
That's a great question. I think it would probably be easier to answer if I knew somebody was intentionally not being transparent. Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question. I think some Board of Selectmen members have been doing very good at bringing up issues publicly where they don't believe there's been transparency. It's a little bit difficult as a resident because we sort of don't know what we don't know, so to speak. So we don't necessarily know about this lack of transparency. Some of the things with the lease that are, we don't have privy to all that information. But I think it continually comes out sort of lack of transparency, and we hear that, and so again, that's something that needs to be addressed.
So it's one of the things that I think residents have talked about recently, and on the flip side, you want to get residents and voters more engaged in the process. And you talk about people talking about things on Facebook and without really necessarily some of the background knowledge. So what do you think is a way that you can get residents more involved, more people turning out to the town meeting, more people coming out to vote? What's something you can do to increase participation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think something that the town really needs to focus on is engagement. I've thought a lot about that same issue, that same question. And one of the things that struck me early on was, if I want to know what happened recently in the town, and then I look for the Good Morning Wilton article, which is great, compliments to you. But is that really how we should know what's going on in town? Because it's hard to find anything in town. The website's hard to navigate. You can't really find stuff. You guys do a great job, but is that our expectation? What if you decide you're going to move and take Good Morning with? Then what? Then where are we? You know what I mean? And I saw the bill that was proposed to help fund local news agencies. Like, yeah, I do my research too, so I read your letter. I would have agreed with.
Yeah.
We could talk another side topic. I'm interested to understand why it didn't pass. It was interesting because I looked at the voting, and it was, no by all Republicans and yes by all Democrats, which as a Republican, I'm like, well, why wouldn't you support that? But then it failed anyway. So it's like, well, I guess it didn't matter. But we could talk about that later. But in all, I mean, seriously though, that's part, I mean, you should, because you are doing us a public benefit. And again, it goes to, that shouldn't be what you are doing. Like, we shouldn't have to rely on Good Morning Wilton to find out what's going on in town. And I know people will say, well, if you look at this email and look at these websites over here, and there's all these different places. So what I think, one of the things I think we should do, I think we should have a town app, personally. I mean, there's app for everything. And it's not like you have to develop them all yourself. If you look at the town of Rye, they have a great app. All the information's there. You can opt in, you can opt out. But we have so many events going on. And on Facebook a little while ago, somebody said, oh, they're doing this in Ridgefield. They're having food trucks and all this great stuff. Somebody responded, oh, we have that in Shanks Island this weekend. But they just didn't know. Now, it doesn't mean if there's an app, everybody's going to know, but that's part of it. And I know you guys put out a calendar and it's great, but the town, like, with an app that's easy, right? We can have a calendar, all the different things on there, all the dates, meetings, and it's not that hard, and it helps with the connectivity. Because I think we need to do that. Talking about elections, right? I'm running for Board of Selectmen. The turnout in this election historically is like 14%. It's hardly anything, and then it goes beyond, and I could talk forever, but if you look at who's voting, the people that voting is not the biggest block of the population. And it's not the people who are, we say, we moved here for the schools, we're here for the schools, but the people that are voting, their kids are already gone. They have different wants and desires and needs than I think we need to address that issue. We've got a great town. We've got so many great things. And when you read something like I did on Facebook with somebody just saying, hey, what's great about Wilton? You read that, you're like, this is a great town. We're focusing on the negative issues because that's what we're trying to address, but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture that we have a great town. We're lucky to live here, right? I mean, it's beautiful. We're close to the, I don't have to tell you all the great reasons to live here, but we have so many great things going for us. Yes, we need to fix and address these issues, if you will, these smaller issues, accounting issues. I shouldn't say smaller, but issues in town hall. But we need to focus on the bigger picture and say, hey, let's continue. How do we maintain what we have? Certainly keep making it better, but we're doing well. Let's keep doing better. We need more people to get involved. We're representative government. The beauty of a town like Wilton is it's easy to get involved. I saw somebody saying something about the same people, for their egos being on these boards. Like, I've tried. That's not true, because in the last year, I can tell you how hard it is to get people to serve. And the reason why it's the same people, because they're the only people who will step up and do it.
Yep.
So
yeah. Great place to kind of sum it all together. What's your 30-second elevator pitch for why people should vote for you?
I think I have the experience in my professional life to address some of the issues at town hall that have been kind of the top of the news for a while. But I think I have a good idea of the broader perspective and what people are looking for in our town. My goal is to make Wilton a great place to live, to continue, I should say, to keep it a great place to live. I'm passionate about our town. I'm passionate about what I do. I love talking to people about the town, and I'd be more than happy to be able to serve the town.
Andy, thank you so much. It was really good to talk to you.
I was going to say, Heather, what do I have to do to get your vote?
That's a secret I keep close in here. but I really appreciate,
Okay.
listen, I appreciate you talking to us, talking to the
Yeah.
voters and, and stepping up. I mean, like you said, it's, it's
Yeah.
an important thing for everybody to step up and get involved. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's good to meet you both. I'm sure I'll talk to you again.